Well, hello, wonderful friends. Today, I couldn't be more excited to welcome Lily Liu on the show. Lily, you are the president of the Solana Foundation, co-founder of Anagram, and you're also an investor and advisor to many projects in tech. Welcome to Crypto Backstage, Lily.
Thanks for having me, Alice.
So in a minute, we'll come back to your role and responsibility as the president of one of the largest blockchain measured by whether market cap, TVL, or activity. In particular, I'd love to discuss how you navigated the challenges that Solana experienced after the fallout of FTX in 2022, but also what the incredible upward trajectory of your chain, your token, and your activity means to you and your team and how you lead. In short, we want to know whether, no matter the market sentiment and the price action, do you lead and execute in the same way? And in the second part of the episode, we'll discover the key pillars and hottest project on Solana and how you plan to outgrow maybe Ethereum. So before we get started, Lily, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself, what you were doing before Solana and your journey into Web3?
Totally. So I live here in Switzerland now. That's how Alize and I actually know each other. The quaint town of Zug, Crypto Valley, known to some. And but before I came to Switzerland, I lived in California for a while. Before that, tried for a while. I'm from California originally, and I started my career working in traditional environments, worked for Morgan Stanley, worked at McKinsey, worked at KKR. My first startup was in building hospitals in China, which is not exactly a tech startup, and very challenging in many ways. And then I heard about Bitcoin in 2013 when I was still living in Shanghai. And like many people, I thought it was probably up to no good when you first heard about it. I thought it was certainly the province of money launderers, drug dealers, people laundering drug money, that type of thing. But, like many of us who maybe hear about Bitcoin or hear about crypto for the first time, whoever's telling you about it, they're really religious, right? I mean, they just won't stop. It is a religion. And so after a few episodes of this, I looked into it, I read the white paper, and then I was hooked, right? It certainly wasn't just, a scam. And it was so interesting to me because as someone who's spent a lot of time kind of thinking about political economy, and particularly and specifically with regards to China's economic development and economic history, and its kind of incredible sort of, up until more recently, incredible economic growth. This whole idea that you'd have this kind of technology mediated, decentralized governance over an economic system is crazy, right? And it was so interesting to me because of what it proposed from a governance perspective, and the various possibilities that opens up. And I think that's still very true kind of motivation today. I think there's a huge amount of kind of innovation space there that is yet to be really sort of realized. But that's what got me into it. It was also just such a contrast to if you're living in a place like China, which is I've had some iteration of this governance model over the last 10 years, but generally it's like a very sort of state-led type of system. Crypto is like the polar opposite, right? So that's what got me interested in it. I went back to the US after that. Met this guy Balaji Srinivasan, who I think many people in crypto, and increasingly people outside of crypto for sure, know for just incredible insight that he brings to so many different topics. And we took over this very broken company called 21. They've been extremely successful in Bitcoin mining before it wasn't. And when we inherited it, 80 million in debt, 30 million in cash, no breaking product. And so it's a little bit of a challenge to take on.
You bought the company? You bought the company?
We didn't buy it. We Balaji had been involved in the early days, was not involved for a couple of years, and then it was on tough times, so we had to take it over to take from the management of it. Turned that into Earn.com, went from chip manufacturing and large scale data center operations into a consumer app called Earn.com, and sold that to Coinbase, and then that later became Coinbase Earn, which is kind of kicked off the whole learn and earn type of concept, which I think now you see in a number of different places throughout the crypto universe, and been doing various things since. For me, I think that And this relates to sort of how I got involved in Solana. This idea that there's this pretty amazing technology and lots of amazing possibilities, but many of these cases have been more articulated, I would say, in blog posts for a long time, rather than actually being implemented in actual production, on-chain, all that type of stuff, because it's hard. And when I first started using Solana in 2021, so kind of before that, I went through a little bit of, I wouldn't say Bitcoin maxi phase, but like the Bitcoin rationalist phase, I'll say. And
Yes.
and I love Bitcoin. Will always love Bitcoin. I think to say otherwise is at the very least being disrespectful to your elders. And so I will always love Bitcoin. I have enormous respect for Ethereum. But then when I started using Solana, I was just blown away because you clicked a button, something happened, and that was the only time where I felt like I had an experience in Web3 that was similar enough to your just like basic experience in Web2, where you want something to happen, it just happens, you know? And it's like a very simple, very basic type of thing, but it's, you know, the root of you know, a consumer experience. And so when I thought, you know, gosh, 60 minutes to clear to finalize a to get finality on Bitcoin and a couple of minutes on Ethereum. You know, all of the innovation aside, that's just not how. That's not the basic transaction that can support a user experience that. Let's not even say 100 million, let's just like much less a billion, or the 4 billion people who have an internet connection are going to be able to get behind, right? If you just think about sort of what we accept in crypto, which is you do a transaction, then you go to your block explorer and you look at that page, which is frankly to most people like a bunch of gibberish, right?
Yes,
And we think that's normal. That's not normal. So when I started using Solana, I was like, okay, you know, there's still many things that are very blockchainy about this. But the core of it is that it works really fast, really well. Like the cool kind of design aesthetic of Solana in the early days, some of which is persisted till now, it's also like very cool, kind of like different feel to it. And so I got into it, and I guess I went through a little bit of that same religious Bitcoin onboarding experience that I experienced in 2013. I went through that with Solana, I would say probably March or April of 2021. I started using Radium and all of the DeFi stuff that you do within Radium. And just like how responsive it was, how snappy it was. You didn't have to sit there and like wait 2 minutes for every click. It was just amazing. I was like telling everyone about it. Telling my own grandma about it. She did not care, right? So that's how I got interested in Solana, and by chance, kind of got back in touch with Roger Tolley. Kind of know each other a little bit earlier through the San Francisco blockchain space. And at that time, I just started Anagram, and I was like, yeah, you know, maybe help out a little bit with Solana, because I was just very interested in the ecosystem, and that escalated continually until the present time. I guess 2.5 years, almost 3 years later, where I'm president of the foundation and do a lot of stuff.
Yes, it's amazing, and so many questions come to mind listening to your story. So the first one is, I'd love to hear, so whether in Shanghai or in California, were you then joining meetups? Were there only Bitcoin maxis, like very small groups? Is it how it started, or how do you really start meeting other peoples in the industry?
Yeah, in the early days, look, the industry was just tiny, right? And everyone was, we're all, I guess we all consider ourselves a little bit like the band of outsiders, right? Like I think there's a very strong sort of anti-conformist, anti-authoritarian, right? You know, anti-mainstream narrative theme for sure within people who got into crypto early, right? Heavily contrarian, because you had to be. Most people were looking at Bitcoin and thinking drug money, right? Money laundering, crime, right?
Still today.
Yeah, to an extent, even still today, although, you know, obviously it's changed massively with ETF and $60,000 Bitcoin as of the last 3 days, I guess, right?
Yes.
And so in order to be interested in Bitcoin and to, you know, spend all of your time and possibly all of your money working at Bitcoin as well is like a heavily contrarian bet, right? And I think that the people who took that bet in the early days, first of all, don't even see it as a bet. They just saw it as necessary as a mission. It's not even a bet, right? A bet means that you potentially hedge, right? I think a number of people saw that because it's just their strong conviction and worldview alignment with many of the things that Bitcoin represents. And I think that is absolutely what filtered for and selected for a number of the early people in that world. And there's just not that many people, frankly, right? And then when Ethereum came along, obviously expanded pretty dramatically, and the ICO concept was something a lot of people could get behind. I still remember with a tinge of sort of nostalgia, right? Those like ICO countdown clocks, right?
Yeah, and then
it's like
nobody
as
could get
nostalgic
in.
as like the GeoCities websites from I guess like 1998 or something like that. So that obviously brought in the tent of here are the types of things you can do with crypto, so that expanded the community into sort of the, I guess, broadly defined kind of smart contract platform infrastructure for decentralized applications. This is still a holy grail question. What are the decentralized applications that can't be done on Web 2, can only be done with crypto? Why do you need a token? All fair questions.
Absolutely. Yes. And so when we think about Solana and Ethereum, did you find that Solana was really kind of bridging the gap between enabling self-custody and being in charge of your finances in a decentralized way, but also enabling an easier onboarding? Because I know that a lot of Bitcoin believers actually think it's a good thing that it's not so easy to onboard. It's also because with a privilege or rights comes responsibility and hurdles. You can't have it both. How did you think about that?
Yeah, I think that first of all, I think one thing that unifies people across various different crypto communities, right, is I think we all collectively believe in the value of self-custody. And that is something that, whether you're part of this tribe or that tribe, which typically snap at each other on Twitter, right, that is something we can all get behind. And so to me, I consider I'm like a crypto maxi first and foremost, and self-custody is that common ground. Now, I don't think that self-custody is the only way necessarily that you should be holding your assets. It should just be in the same way some people might hold gold in like the bullion form, and other people will have access to a gold ETF. It's perfectly fine and legitimate in my mind for there to be multiple ways that people can access an asset, hold their money. Okay, so that being said, I think self-custody should be part of the different ways that people custody their wealth. And increasingly, now that crypto is moving beyond just sort of a representation of an asset, but to actually, how you custody your information as well, right? It should be part of, I guess, a portfolio of ways that you express your ownership, right? And so absolutely, if you have $100 bills in your pocket and you lose them, then you lost hundreds of dollars. Now, obviously, the risk is greater if you lose your seed phrase, that could be anywhere between fraction of a cent and hundreds of millions of dollars, right? We've all heard of those stories. Yes. And so that's something that obviously requires a different level of prudence. That being said, if someone loses their seed phrase, which is related to the basis for hundreds of millions of dollars, that's not self-custody's fault, right? Obviously, there's different trade-off spaces, and we as an industry also need to think about different solutions to mitigate and design around that trade-off space. But that's certainly the wrong answer to say, well, self-custody is dangerous. No, I don't think that's the case. So
no. Yeah, exactly, and it's really at the core of this whole industry and this whole vision. All right, so bring us back, please, to 2021. So you join. What is it that? So there is a kind of an emerging DeFi ecosystem on Solana, very vibrant because of Solana is very fast. Oops, sorry. So what do you see your responsibilities? What do you want to put in place? What is there to be done? How does your team look like? It would be great to hear about that, please.
Yeah, so in the early days, I think the end of 2020, beginning of 2021 was when Solana started. So people started building CRM, which is a central limited order book protocol based on Solana. And that was, I think, one of the early demonstrations of things that are only possible on Solana. I know that's now kind of turned into a campaign, but that's always kind of been the to me like one of the reasons I was interested in Solana, because I think very frankly, people see the high performance as being a feature of Solana. I think that is like one of the missing features in blockchain. I think
Right.
that I think in blockchain sometimes we are so kind of used to the way things are that we accept those as being necessarily true. I don't think so. It's like saying that we're just going to accept the fact that the internet runs on a 56K modem, and then why don't we design everything around that?
Mhm.
And so to me, one of the classic examples is a company like Netflix. They've been around since the late 90s. When the world was running on modems, what were they doing? They were mailing DVDs to your house. And that was the way they sort of expanded, I guess, access to movie entertainment, right? And video content entertainment. And that was very novel at the time, really innovative.
Mhm.
These days, they stream content because the infrastructure got massively better for them to continue to deliver, I guess, topically a similar type of experience for consumers. But like, those are not, is that the same company? I guess so. Is that the same product? Of course not. And so
Uh-huh.
that to me is when we see sort of high performance as just being like yet another feature on the list, I just really think that's the wrong way to think about it, right? It's a core improvement that allows something, if you use Netflix as an analogy, go from mailing DVDs
Mhm.
to streaming content. Wildly different experience, right?
Mhm.
And so that was what I got interested in initially, just viscerally as a user. And then also, I think that there are various things that, as I kind of looked into it, were very important when it comes to, it's not just the product itself that you can do order book trading on chain on Solana because it can support it. But then also, when you looked into sort of the type of talent that came to Solana as a result,
Mhm.
it was developer talent that came from HFD background, trading background, really high quality developer talent. And that
From the
is
financial space and capital
yeah,
market space. Okay.
from the
Oh,
finance
wow.
world. And then also, DevOps engineers, right? Because of the sort of technical challenges and kind of interesting technical aspects of a higher spec validator that Solana uses. Um, and so attracted quite a number of sort of very talented minds into the ecosystem. And that was also something that I felt like was unique, right? Because I think what you've seen in a number of aspects of kind of crypto's evolution is, I think it's just over the last number of years, there's a number of chains that kind of launched. And it's hard to build your own developer community. It's really hard, which is why
Mhm.
if you have an independent developer community, that next to the network itself is your crown jewel.
Nice.
And so what I think a number of other chains have chosen to do, or maybe have had to do, is essentially go to market with the EVM developer base, right? And what that means is that you're essentially sort of part of the larger EVM, I guess, complex. But then it also means that sort of the defensibility of the apps that you're building is quite low because of portability from, EVM environment A to B to C is extremely easy, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that the potential to see sort of the differentiation within kind of the EVM world is much harder to sort of carve out. And it's easier to get started. It's harder to remain competitive within totally independent sort of technology sort of platforms like Solana. Than Solana, it's hard. It was harder for Solana to get started and sort of get to this critical mass of developer base. But then once you have that, then that's pretty magical.
Yes. Yeah, completely relate to that. And so let's talk about this problem, which is called the cold start problem, right? So how did you get to that critical mass of developers? And I understand they weren't already in Web3 in this like Ethereum base of developers that are building the Ethereum vision and Solidity. They mainly came from traditional industries, financial industries. So they came organically to you guys, or were you very, I don't know, doing lots of hackathons? Solana is very well known for
Yeah.
their hackathons. So what was your
Yeah.
strategy there?
Well, I think that so that was I think the whole CRM and collab type of thing had a lot to do with it in the early days, because that was something that was so it was everyone comes to crypto initially. Well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people come to crypto initially because of the financial incentive, right? That's what attracts, that's what piques people's attention initially. That's
Even
always been true.
developers,
Yeah, of course. I mean, developers, look, they're developers, but they're not
they still
priests,
need
right?
to, yeah.
Like developers are here to make a living. Let's be clear. And
Some people forget that. Some people forget that, you know, they want to
yeah,
harvest enthusiasm, and you're like, well, yeah, but I
yeah.
guess they also have their own life and
You know,
families.
people want that. People want to have the time and enjoy what they do, certainly.
Mhm,
But you know, vibes don't pay. And that's
mhm,
been also one of the insights that not even just at Solana, but even prior with Earn.com. I mean, the very name of it, the whole idea is that people can make a living online, doing various
mhm,
kind of digital types of activities. And so, and the most productive skill set in that realm or in this realm is really being an engineer, right? It's the most scalable skill set, most productive skill set, has the most potential for amplification. Anyways, so I think that the kind of like cloud phenomenon was one that was so distinctive at the time and attracted a lot of talent that were like, wow, this is pretty crazy, right? That I have an applicable skill set. This is something that is potentially wildly profitable because it's like, just price movement is massively volatile and huge in crypto. And then also the perp phenomenon, right? So BitMEX, which originally came up with the perp, is now sort of mainstay of crypto, but that's an example of financial product that you can really only do in crypto, right?
mhm.
And initially on centralized exchanges, and then being able to do that fully on chain. And there's just a lot of interesting mechanisms to explore there, both sort of more from the economic design mechanisms, and then also technical implementation of those mechanisms, entirely new ways of recomposing financial markets that I think is interesting to so many different people, right?
Yeah.
Who probably come from traditional industries.
Hmm. And the foundation was very much supporting that. So supporting the emergence of many different DeFi protocols, innovating with opportunities around finance.
It's supportive, sure, right? But then, really, the vast majority of innovation is coming from the community. And that's exactly the way it should be, right? That is a mark of a really robust community and a really robust ecosystem. It's the foundation's role. You kind of see the foundation as being a little bit like the mayor's office of an emergent city, like the Solana city.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I'm not sure that everyone thinks about foundations like this. And
Yeah, I
I'm
love
not
how
sure
you
that,
describe it.
yeah, I think most people really kind of take, because everyone, typically comes from a corporate background. People from a corporate background, they look at, foundation, okay, this is the company, right? But if you think about that and where those analogies lead you to, I think that it very quickly diverges from what actually we think the mission in crypto is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a company's success is to be like an Apple, right? You centralize so much resource, human and financial, and you completely dominate your market, right? And then and then there's maybe one or two other players that sort of do a similar type of thing, and then you end up with this kind of oligopoly type of outcome, typically, especially where there's many resources required. And that's why you've got Apple, $1 trillion company, trillion plus, right? Nvidia, couple $1 trillion company, because
Mm-hmm.
they solved a really hard problem and they've been rewarded for it, right? And so that's like ultimate gold medal success state for a company. The ultimate gold medal success state for a blockchain or a cryptocurrency is, a little bit like Bitcoin right now, right? Where it's fully decentralized, it has no center, and it just has this community of folks that are anywhere between armchair and rapidly committed to that community's ideals and the adoption of whatever it is in that community, right? And
Mm-hmm.
being in crypto, we see that a ton, and it's people not in crypto, it's a crazy phenomenon, but in crypto, we inherently sort of understand that sense of like mission, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that so put in a simpler way, a company wants to centralize all resource, human and financial, and then it's so blockchain wants to decentralize all resource, both human and financial, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you run it like a company, you're actually definitionally going to get to the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why really, at least I do, and numbers really try to think about it quite differently. Now, that being
Mm-hmm.
said, It is still very much early days. Solana only launched on mainnet about, I guess, almost exactly 4 years ago, right? And that's early days in any technology, especially one which is as complex as as these blockchains kind of built from cut from whole cloth. And so there's still probably a role for the foundation in the early days, absolutely. And I think the way I kind of think about that is, so first of all, we're all here in blockchain because we think that blockchains can enable sort of these 10x types of products to be built and user experiences to be built. If we don't believe that, and we think it's just really about sort of Bitcoin being digital gold and that being the core sort of value proposition of all of blockchain to humankind, which is more or less my Bitcoin rationalist mindset back in 2018, 2019, then you should just work on Bitcoin. Or maybe not even work on Bitcoin, just buy Bitcoin and live a happy life.
You're
right?
not a builder. You're not trying
You're
to.
not a builder because, well, some people think there isn't really anything to build, right? Just buy Bitcoin, be happy, right? And that's a totally valid view of the world. Now, the rest of us, we're taking this bet that there are 10x experiences and products to be built on blockchain in the same way that there were and are these 10x sort of user experiences being built on the internet. So it wasn't just about digitizing the newspaper. In the same ways, it's for us not going to be entirely just about tokenizing an asset, right? It'd be like, look, share and fund that was on, here's the paper and now here's the token type of thing. That's a good starting point. But then if that's a bet that we're all taking, then the question is, what are these kind of 10x products, right? So then if you define that and you anchor to that, and that ultimate vision may be 5 years away, maybe 10 years away, could be even longer, right? Then the role of us foundation is to potentially help unblock that path. And the classic way of thinking about the types of things that only the foundation can do are, of course, like public goods provision. And so, classically, the types of things like talking to financial infrastructure providers, right? Speaking with custodians, for example, and helping them support the technologies, like a very sort of very first order type of thing that is best done by a foundation. Helping get in basic
kind of
infrastructure like that in place.
accelerator support. Is it?
I think there's part of it which is infrastructure. And this is when it comes to the growth side. I think the most basic thing that needs to be done is the health of the network, right? Supporting the health of the network. We do that through we gave a grant to develop FireDancer, right? And that's gonna be second core client. Outside of Ethereum, no one else has a second core client, so that's pretty powerful. And not only is it powerful because there's a second core client, but because FireDancer is incredible, right? So and we recently are in the process of getting granted a third validator client. And so between all of that, I think that's pretty interesting for the Solana ecosystem to have, diversity, to have client diversity. Okay, so the number one thing that you should always care about is network health. The number two thing is the health of your developer ecosystem, right? Because kind of if you think about this as the hierarchy of needs, the most important thing is that the blockchain exists and is healthy and is functioning and is doing what it should be doing, because no blockchain network, no blockchain, nothing for anyone else to do, nothing exists, right? And then once you've got the actual network working, the next thing you need is a diverse, robust, sort of very active developer community, right? Because they're the ones that build applications. And if there's no applications, there's nothing for users to use. So, thinking about users without having a robust developer community is premature, because what are they going to do, right? Are they just going to send transactions on the bare network? And I guess we call that a payment, but that's not even that is really the product, right? They can just send the native token back and forth, and that gets pretty old after a period of time. So so developer network is like the second thing that is the foundation we're really focused on. And then I think the third is unblocking public goods, or providing public goods, facilitating the development of public goods, infrastructure, which has a very pretty broad definition. Open
source code and open source tooling? Is that what you mean by public goods?
I think that's certainly an aspect of public goods. And then there's when it comes to infrastructure, infrastructure, I consider custodians to be part of ecosystem infrastructure, right? I consider bridges to be part of ecosystem infrastructure. And as things evolve, then there will be other sort of things that kind of fit broadly into that category. But basically, the types of things that that many applications will use, but then not any one of those or even a consortium of those applications would be able to efficiently sort of help bring into the ecosystem. So
So
I think
bridges,
bridges
efficient
are like very good.
dexes,
Yeah.
custodians.
Dexes, that's kind of further
That's
on
an
the
application.
spectrum. That's more application, of course. And that's where obviously this thing is like a bit of a spectrum. I do actually consider the financial kind of application vertical to be both application as well as part of core infrastructure, right? Because if say you want to have a really robust experience around NFTs and creator monetization, for example, then there have to be the rails to actually monetize that, and that is exchanges, that is swapping, that is fundamentally sort of having liquidity, a liquidity ecosystem, and finance vertical, right? And so I think that DEXs, for example, are, I guess, applications that are also infrastructure. And so therefore there's, to me, what I kind of think about is there's these various product verticals, products and experiences that you'd like to enable in the future. And you should have a thesis around why those are 10x better, right? If you talk about the finance vertical, for example, to me, that's a very clear one because it's been articulated from the very beginning within crypto, which is this kind of global payment system, right? That was part of, not solely, but also that was kind of part of the original vision of Bitcoin even. And that's actually 15 years later has not come to pass anywhere in crypto, with the exception of emergently sort of within Solana. And in order to, I think first you got to envision what those kind of 10x use cases, if you will, are going to be. And then what is the path from here to there and how do I unlock it? And that to me is what the foundation should be contributing to.
Okay.
Right.
So if I understand correctly, you have basically a few convictions around certain verticals, certain use cases. And what do you do then? Do you then kind of map out, okay, infrastructure, I get it, but also do you map out potential projects, DApps, solutions that can actually put this to life and you give them grants, or which is still in a way making decision and steering the boat to a certain direction, but so yeah, how do you proceed there?
Yeah. So we do some of that, right? And it's so situationally dependent because when you're, if you're talking about sort of more infrastructure type of products versus more DApp related products, then the path looks a little bit different. But generally, try to focus on the things that only the foundation can do. And then also going back to the analogy of the city, right? When you're sort of building towards this eventual future, you want to attract the best people and the best capital, the best talent in to come build with you, right? So actually, before this podcast, I was reading an article about how Singapore brought Taylor Swift into Singapore for 6 concerts and actually made her sign an exclusive that she wouldn't go anywhere else in Southeast Asia. And because they have this like concert economics, Singapore is obviously sort of very forward thinking in terms of economic development. And so they went and they found they had this concert economic strategy, right? And attracts tourists from all around the world to come see Taylor Swift. And they went after the biggest star, right? And I think that I know this is a pretty controversial point. It's a very controversial point because people in crypto also kind of just generally have this concept of credible neutrality. But at the same time, imagine if Singapore was credibly neutral with building its concert going type of economic development strategy, and they didn't try to go pursue Taylor Swift. That's not the right strategy, right? And so you can't be actually, if you really want to sort of, if you really want to go develop that, let's call it an economy or call it an application vertical or something. You have to try to get the best and brightest, right? Because then they become the pillars that create a center of competence and attract other talent and capital to it. So I think there's the concept of credible neutrality when it comes to technology standards, right? But when it comes to actually sort of really building an idea into an edifice, into a pillar, right, of the metaphorical city, I think you have to think about it differently.
Amazing.
You want the superstars.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They act as lighthouses that then attract even greater players in your ecosystem. All right, so let's shift to today, and your kind of mind-blowing stats. More than 11 million active accounts, kind of 22 million NFTs minted, very fast transaction per second, more than 2,000 transactions that cost almost nothing. So this is great, but how easy is it to build on Solana, and is it something you're really focusing on? Because I understand you're using proof of history. What is that? How does it work? Is it for any developer? Do they need to do a lot of, I don't know, iteration before they're able to code and deploy?
So proof of history runtime, that's something that your typical dApp developer is not directly sort of trying to modify, or doesn't have to directly kind of address that, right? So I think slightly separate things. Proof of history essentially uses hashes in order to be like a form of keeping machine time, and that's what enables the parallelization of transaction processing, right? And so
which is why it's really
blockchain,
fast then.
Yeah, that's why it's really fast. There's multiple things that had to be done to make it really fast, but then that's kind of like one of the core, I guess, innovations, if you will, which is that because in a blockchain, it's about like one of the most important things is what is the order of transactions, obviously, and then the other one is what gets confirmed in a block, right? And so proof of history allows you to have all the validators be synchronize by synchronizing the hash time on their computers, right? And so that's one of the big innovations, gives you parallel execution, and that's one of the things that contributes to it being very fast. And in terms of developing on Solana, it's based on Rust, and that is a bigger learning curve than learning Solidity, certainly. The good news is that there's a pretty big Rust ecosystem outside of crypto, although now I think crypto is probably a bigger part of Rust than it's pretty big, I think, part of the Rust community. And so there's that. But then, and this is another example of the types of things that we as Foundation will invest in, is improving the developer experience, right? So bringing dev tooling to parity with other ecosystems, introducing additional development frameworks to accelerate the development process and make it more accessible. So there's a whole series of things that we're doing on that front in order to support the developer experience. So that's absolutely in the scope of the things that the Foundation that are really priority for the Foundation.
Do you find the onboarding easier with like Solidity developers that are very used to EVM type of environments, or is it easier to onboard a Web2 Rust developer that's been in a large organization?
Yeah, what I've been told is it's probably easier to onboard someone who's already within crypto, because the concepts are concepts. It's more about sort of the concepts and the types of things that people are trying to do, rather than someone who's already a Rust developer. So that's but leave that to people who are actually on either of the inbound. Yeah, so
got it. Would love to talk about challenging times. There has been a few crises that you've had to manage with your team. One of them being the fallout of FTX. Other ones being some of the network outages, etc. So can you kind of bring us back? If we take FTX, how did like the different groups react? Your investors, retailers, developers. And how did you organize, I don't know, internally to kind of manage the situation, move forward, and keep Solana on its toes?
It was shocking. So before FTX happened, we were already in a bit of the bear market, right? Luna happened in May of 2022. So there's already 6 months of things being a little bit softer. And then right before FTX happened, we were doing our second Breakpoint conference in Lisbon. And I think it was November 9th or something. We were just coming on a final day of Breakpoint, and we were thrilled about it, right? It was the middle of bear market with 3,000 folks, 80% of them builders at Breakpoint.
That's your
Had
Solana conference for those who
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, the annual Solana conference. And so we did that in Lisbon, and everything was going great, right? We're like, wow, in a bear market, we're just ecosystem is doing really well. And then it was that, I think, Friday or something like that. I think it was the 9th, where the news started to come out on Twitter. And then basically a day later, there was all the crazy news about Binance buying FTX before, of course, they didn't, and no one knew what was going on. And then FTX just disappeared, right? And that was obviously shocking. And it was like this nuclear blast on all of crypto. But then Solana was kind of that the closest village to the actual sort of epicenter of the blast. And
Why is
FTX
that? For those who don't know, you had a lot of their tokens on your balance sheet of the foundation. Is that correct?
Not just the token holdings, but really the FTX had been, especially in sort of 2020, had been hugely supportive of Solana, right? They pursued Solana, I think, very very ardently, and actually sort of built Serum. They had built a lot of the infrastructure for the Solana ecosystem in the early days. The exchange, which was obviously a very large exchange, effectively operated as an on and off ramp for SPL, so Solana's fungible token standard SPL USDC. They provided the Solid wallet, provided the bridge that was underlying BTC that was sitting in Solana DeFi. Let's see what else. They were one of the primary listing venues for new Solana tokens coming to market, and all those types of things are just really, really important. Kind of like market infrastructure for any L1, right? So when all that went away practically overnight, right? So all the BTC that was on the Solid bridge basically went to zero, right? Because obviously it was not backed by anything. And so that has ripple effects in DeFi, right? If certain assets essentially, like all of your Bitcoin assets essentially wipe out, and then the loss of SPL on and off ramps for USDC was also that also is pretty unfortunate. And then one of the biggest things was that they'd also been a big funder of projects within the Solana ecosystem. And a lot of the Solana projects had kept their treasuries on FTX. In fact, sometimes that was a condition of FTX and or Alameda, which now seem to be a little bit one and the same, of them investing. And so, imagine a project that kept half their treasury on FTX, that money is literally zero, and the runway just got cut in half overnight. And so that happened to a critical mass of different projects where they just literally got haircut overnight, and that's a pretty big crisis type of thing. So those are some of the reasons why FTX going to zero overnight really affected Solana. We were all shocked, right? I for one, I was speechless.
Can
for
imagine.
a couple of days. So that was a pretty tough, I would say, November and December.
And all these projects turn to the foundation typically when something like that happened, and look for ways to, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we had conversations with a lot of the projects and try to support them in various ways. But I mean, that was like it was a pretty crazy time. And I think it was a crazy time for so many different people. But then, of course, L1 amongst L1s, Solana was the most affected. And a lot of people left Solana for dead. I guess, in crypto, we like these like pretty spicy narratives. And so that was a pretty spicy narrative at the time. But then internally, okay, so for me, this is my third bear market. And so, and they're ugly every time. This one was uglier than most. I hope that's the ugliest one I ever see. But that's what we get in crypto. You get crazy bear markets, you get incredible, also crazy bull markets, where some crazy stuff happens there as well. And really the answer is you have to stay level headed and be able to build through the bear and also through the bull. And even when the volatility of the market can be however many times up, it can go up by 10x literally in weeks, right? And then you can also get haircut 98%.
Yes.
um, uh, if you react to that emotionally, and if you change your strategy by 98%, then that doesn't work, right? So that said, I think there are some differences between how you operate in a bull market and a bear market, right?
What are they?
Yeah. So in a bull market, what you want to do is you want to attract as much talent and capital as you can into the ecosystem. Capital not so much into the Sol token, but really into people that are building on Solana, right? And you want to attract as much talent as you can into the ecosystem, because obviously there's like renewed interest into blockchain. It's renewed. We already see it happening. A year ago, all the banks pulled out of crypto. All the developers went back to their jobs at Meta, if there were still jobs at Meta to be had. And everyone's going back to Web 2, and like this whole Web 3 not working out. Meta itself pulled out of everything, took Instagram out of whatever pilots they were doing, Robinhood, listed the whole thing, right?
Yeah, VCs going to AI.
Yeah, VCs went to AI. I think they're coming back to crypto. Maybe it's just because they see the crypto and AI narrative. I don't know, right? Now that there's kind of this resurgent interest, and it's always on the backs of some sort of new narrative, then you want to attract as much of that talent as you can to your ecosystem, right? And so often there's like a simplifying way of thinking about these things. There's human capital, there's financial capital. So in a bear market, you want to preserve sort of fiat, and you want to incentivize people on your token, right? So if they're committed in a bear market, and people who are there in a bear market are generally committed, they're there. Then they kind of take a bet on one another. Typically, sort of go heavy on tokens, and then people that kind of stick with you in the bear market times are rewarded when the market changes, right? And so that is one thing. And I think in a bull market, then it's more sort of probably a cash environment than a token environment. In all cases, you care about attracting talent. But then I think in a bull market, it's a little bit more of a quantity game, right? And then in a bear market, there's no real quantity to be had anyways. And so that's when you really double down on the best builders, even more than you would normally, because those people who are your best builders in a bear market are going to be the pillars of your ecosystem when the bull market comes.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ways that we think about it.
Yeah. Amazing. And one small point around your treasury, did you have to make a lot of changes? I don't know, diversify your custodians, or did you have to rethink also your governance model at the foundation post FTX, or
not so much? Yeah.
Okay. So I would love to. We're getting towards the end of the podcast, and there has been these emerging amazing narratives where Solana has been in the spotlight with Memecoins and airdrops, and I'd love to hear it from you. Did they kind of emerge organically? Were you personally excited about these innovations and these meme coins and everything that comes with it? I'm thinking about Jupiter, for instance, which is a decentralized trading aggregator. They made a $700 million airdrop on Solana, and it's one of the largest in history. Many people were frustrated not to be chosen and able to receive the airdrop. So what led to these emerging narratives and this really big success on Solana?
A number of people discovered Jupiter more recently. Jupiter first launched in 2021. I've been using Jupiter since 2021. And then Bonk, everyone discovered Bonk in November, December. Bonk launched in the end of December 2022, when I think the ecosystem was really in its darkest time, and the price of Sol was $8, right?
Okay.
And so Bonk has also been a well-loved, I guess, community coin representing those people who stuck around with Solana when
loyal
many
partner.
people left Solana for dead. And so a number of these coins now, they seem like these airdrops to people who aren't in Solana. They seem like these like mystical, bizarre, strangely in the hundreds of millions. Even Jito was larger than Jupe. I forget how large Jito was, but it was shocking, right?
No.
Where did this come from, right? Why is
Yeah,
that worth $700 million?
exactly.
And Jito as well. Jito's been around since I think I first met the Jito team in 2021.
Okay.
And so these projects are these, going back
They're
to
really
talking
not
about sort
new.
of the pillars, right? The pillars of your ecosystem. That really sort of double down with you in a bear market. Those are some of the examples.
Mhm. Okay. And so what led them to then, launch their token and play with airdrops? Is it the emergence of the bull market? Is it a market
That
timing?
one is a little bit chicken or the egg. In fact, I think
Okay.
if you do like a $1 billion airdrop, I think you can't do $1 billion airdrop unless it's a bear market won't support $1 billion airdrop. And then also if you do $1 billion airdrop, I think that probably helps it can only further a bull market, right? Because then suddenly TVL just got minted, right, out of nowhere, and gets a whole certain type of flywheel working. So, airdrops are not specific to Solana by any stretch, right? Do you remember the Arbitrum? I think it's Arbitrum airdrop last year or something that was also close to like $1 billion, something crazy like that. And so, the airdrops is a surefire way that any ecosystem is going to get a huge sort of like a Nox. It's like the Nox button on like a racing car. It gives you like a big boost forward.
Yeah.
That said, you can't rely on airdrops for more than I would say 6 months, even in a bull market, right? Because at some point there's just saturation.
Yeah.
And there's only so many iterations on a meme coin with or without sartorial accessories that are really actually going to be exciting and drive new activity. That said, it is an important part of how things typically get kicked off. But then you have to transition to something which is more organic, right? So then that's always the question, what is more organic? I've always been a big proponent of the concept of earning. I think that is ultimately where crypto has to get to, right? I think that is actually the largest market here that is going to be disrupted by crypto, which is labor markets. Airdrops is a form of earning. I'm not sure that people have to increasingly people actually had to do something, earn points, whatever, have used the product in order to earn the airdrop. Although it's not the tightest sort of association of doing work and getting rewarded for it. But I guess in a broad conceptual level, that is what's happening. So you could loosely categorize it into the earning kind of category, right? But what you need is you can inject all this capital into an ecosystem in the form of dog coins or in the form of whatever tokens, right? But you have to have organic economic activity, and that's clearly the type of thing that has not been hugely present in crypto up until maybe kind of had DeFi come around and sort of people actually sort of using on-chain payments in order to facilitate these on-chain economies. So that's a start, but there need to be digitally native goods and services, right, and economies that are getting built. Now, my argument going back to the very beginning as to why Solana is because I think that you need to have a performant base layer in order to even explore those types of use cases, right? And to even have a chance at making them come alive. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition.
Very clear. Very interesting. So, Lily, what can we wish to Solana for, I don't know, the 2024 and into 2025?
I think
What are
what
you
to wish for
after, let's
Solana.
say?
What
You
am I
already
after?
yeah, or Solana, you personally actually, and Solana, the foundation.
Yeah. So look, I started my career, I guess, in the finance world. I joke I'm a degen at heart. I'm a banker in my head, right? I'm a finance person when it really comes down to it. And so when it comes to the finance vertical in crypto, it's something I'm personally probably the best best versed in and also quite passionate about. So, and I think that's also really a big theme for 2024. Like back to what we were talking about earlier, where the finance vertical itself is a little bit infrastructure for the rest of the ecosystem. And so I think that's why it's not only sort of narratively relevant, but then also sort of substantially relevant for many reasons as well. So I think one of the examples there is we've been working on stablecoins for a long time. We've been working on payments for a long time. I think RWA is now coming to the fore, right, which ties into institutional finance. So to me, these various kind of elements of, I guess, the broadly defined finance vertical are really important. DeFi, of course, right? DeFi has always been distinctive on Solana, given sort of performance, ability to support clubs. To me, what I'm really excited about, I think is like there's going to be an entirely sort of new arena of financial primitives that are going to be built around payment networks and settlement-based DeFi, right?
Okay.
Think about DeFi as we define it today. It's all like buy, sell, and send, receive doesn't really have DeFi built on top of it because the only liquid, the most liquid layer right now is ERC20, and you can't build settlement-based DeFi on it because it's unaffordable, right? But it is affordable to build it on Solana. So that is, I think, kind of like the new arena that I would like us to open up in 2024, and I think that's going to be, the type of thing that you can really only do on Solana.
Okay, wonderful. It's been a real pleasure having this chat with you, Lily. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your passion. Before I let you go, where can people follow your journey online?
I am on Twitter. I'm CA Lily Liu. I'm not terribly active on Twitter. I'm thinking about that. But that's probably a place to start.
All right, amazing. Well, see you next time. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thanks, Halise.